I forgot you're a bracelet guy.
Yeah, I'm for sure a bracelet guy.
Welcome to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a nerd culture podcast that discusses nerddom through various segments. My name is Tyler Hunt, and I am here alongside my co-host, as always, Pat Kuhn. How's it going, dude?
I'm good. Kind of tired. I had another long night last night playing Call of Duty Prop Hunt. They brought it back, and me and my buddy jumped on, a couple of my buddies actually, and we played a little prop hunt. So it was a late night. Getting old, so 1, 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm still playing video games, ends up being kind of a shitty Sunday because I'm just tired the rest of the day. So, but it was a lot of fun. I enjoy playing prop hunt. I'm glad that they brought it back because they had it for a while, and I played it the weekend they had it quite a lot. That was basically all I did a couple of weekends ago. And then they brought it back just recently, which I was happy, but I wasn't necessarily that surprised because it was so popular the first time. So I figured it was only a matter of time.
The most surprising thing about that story would be that you have a couple buddies, I think.
Well, let's be honest. I have two good friends. One of them I'm talking to right now, and the other one brought one of his friends. So technically, there was 3 of us.
Gotcha. Yeah, my weekend, I worked yesterday, so that wasn't great. But I had an early morning. I got up at 7, which isn't. It's not early for normal day standards, but for a Sunday morning, that's pretty early for me. So, because I had to watch Cloverfield Paradox, which, spoiler alert, we'll be reviewing this episode. So, I've had a jam-packed morning already. But, I'm right there with you. I'm a little tired because of it.
Yeah, I work every Saturday, so that's not a big surprise. But the last couple of Saturdays have been really shitty at work, and this Saturday kind of made up for it because it was super, super slow. I ended up watching Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 12 while I was at work, and I'm not sure why I chose. Well, I know why I chose those movies. I had a late Friday night, and I started watching Ocean's 11, just kind of I need something to kind of just wind down a little bit. And I've seen that movie a million times. So I was I'll just watch it, just kind of wind down and not have to pay attention to it. And then I ended up falling asleep halfway through. So I watched the rest of it at work on Saturday. And then I ended up just watching 12. I was whatever, I'll just watch the second one. And it was a really boring day at work, obviously. And then I ended up watching 13 later Saturday night. We were just kind of chilling, me and my wife, and I just started watching that movie. So I watched the Ocean's movies on Saturday for no reason whatsoever. I just was whatever, I'll watch these. And there's a reason why I couldn't remember what happens in 13, because it is by far the worst of the 3. It was pretty fucking boring. But the first 2 are not bad. They're not bad movies.
Yeah, that first one especially is pretty good.
Yeah,
what do you think about Ocean's 8? Have you seen the trailer for that yet?
I have not. I don't know. I'm not really that interested. It seems like kind of one of those. I can't be for sure because I haven't seen the trailer, but it seems like one of those legacy sequels, they're passing the torch, and I just don't really like those types of movies. So, I'd probably check it out because apparently I'm a huge fan of the original franchise. But I'll probably end up checking it out, but I'm not too excited for it.
It's just one of those things where, I'll go see it for sure, but I'm going to cringe every time they make a comment about Sandra Bullock's brother, Danny Ocean, trying to loosely tie it to the other Ocean's movies. So I'm not looking forward to that aspect of it, but the trailer's okay. I'm sure it'll be fine.
And they couldn't have gotten 3 more ladies? Like, I don't understand that.
Well, not only that, but the vibe I get from the trailer is that Anne Hathaway isn't even one of the 8. Like, she's the person, like, I don't know if I'm off base here, but it's almost like she's the person they're stealing from, or she's like a pawn in the scheme, that she's not actually in on the heist. And maybe I misinterpreted that, but yeah. So, I mean, add her to, there's 9 right there. Then you just got to get a couple more.
Well, the kind of the pattern for those movies is that they always add somebody next time. So maybe she'll be the one that they add in the second movie.
Yeah. So we'll see. But anyways, you ready to get this thing rolling?
Yeah, so if this is your first episode, we like to start off each episode by kind of just checking in with each other. Tyler and I don't get to have the nerdy conversations we used to, so we kind of use this first segment as an excuse just to kind of check in with each other, see what we've been up to. We call it What We're Into. So what are you into this week?
So typically when there is a new DC Universe animated movie released, you can pretty much count on me talking about it at some point. And a couple weeks ago, there was a new one released, and then it came out on Blu-ray, I believe, this week. And it was called Batman Gotham by Gaslight. So I had heard of the comic that this animated film is based on before, but what I didn't realize about that comic is that it's considered to be the first Elseworlds tale in DC, back when it was published in 1989. Which was a fantastic year, I might add. But anyways,
You're dumb.
No.
You're a dumb person.
But anyways, the story, Batman, Gotham by Gaslight, is a reimagining where Batman is operating during the Victorian age in 1889, and many characters from the Batman universe are reimagined as Victorian versions of themselves, and the film concentrates on Batman hunting down and stopping Jack the Ripper. I will say this animated movie is rated R and is in the same vein as The Killing Joke, which we reviewed when it came out either last year or the year before. But I am happy to say that this movie is much better than The Killing Joke, although that wasn't really that hard of a task to succeed in because The Killing Joke was awful. It's definitely not perfect, but it sticks the landing a lot better, and it's more fun to watch. However, I do think that the R rating seems more like a marketing ploy than anything else. I honestly couldn't tell you what makes this film R rated, and I'm not sure that the thought process there is anything except capitalizing on the dark and gritty aspect of an R rating and using it to sell more copies of the movie. So, the main cast here is Bruce Greenwood as Bruce Wayne / Batman, who, from the Star Trek movies. He was also the guy in Gerald's Game. So he's kind of a character actor. He's been in a lot of different things. And then Jennifer Carpenter from Dexter is Selena Kyle. And both of them do a fine job, but I honestly don't understand with these movies why they don't just pay the extra couple bucks to cast Kevin Conroy as Batman every chance they get. He should just be Batman. I don't understand why that doesn't happen all the time, but nevertheless, Bruce Greenwood does an okay job. And overall, this was a pretty interesting story to choose to adapt in animated form, but I'm glad they did. It kind of breaks up some of the monotony that you get with these adaptations that come out a couple times a year, and it's an interesting take on familiar characters. It doesn't reinvent the wheel by any means, but it's a fun 70-minute watch. The one thing I will say is, like, it's kind of a whodunit. So I mentioned that it's basically Batman versus Jack the Ripper, and if you know Batman characters and villains, you probably have a guess as to who Jack the Ripper is, and I will tell you that your guess is wrong, and they kind of throw it for a loop in this animated movie, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with the route they went. But, I don't know. It's a fun 70 minutes, so I would recommend it loosely. Like, it's not anything amazing, but it's an okay watch.
I mean, I don't expect you to tell me if I'm right or not, because obviously we don't like to spoil too much. This movie just came out not too long ago, so my guess would be, I mean, the most obvious thing would be the Joker, of course, but I would say Zaz would probably be my second choice, just because he kind of has that Jack the Ripper feel to him as a character anyways. So yeah, that would be definitely a high choice for me. I think that he would fit the character pretty well. Obviously, I don't expect you to tell me if I'm right or not. Maybe off recording. I'm just curious. But yeah, I wonder if they decided not to cast Kevin Conroy as Batman because it, like you said, this story is kind of like the first Elseworld tale, and they're kind of going with a different Batman because it's a different type of movie.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like they're pumping these movies out, like I said, twice a year at this point, and more often than not anymore, it's not Kevin Conroy.
Yeah.
So I just don't get that thinking process because, if I'm guaranteed to buy something if Kevin Conroy's voicing Batman in it. I mean, let's be honest, I'm pretty much guaranteed to buy something if it's just Batman, but I think that there are a lot of people out there that, determine what they buy based on whether or not Kevin Conroy's a part of it. So I don't know. That's just a thought, but, obviously maybe he costs a lot more money than Bruce Greenwood. Who knows? But, anyways, what are you into?
I am into, a Nerd Year's resolution that we made, I guess a couple of months ago now. I wanted to watch Lost. I had never seen it before. Well, I saw I would say maybe not a good chunk of the first season. I probably saw a few episodes of the first season when it first aired. And I've always kind of heard that it's this really amazing show and that I should definitely check it out. But I have never obviously watched the whole series, and so I really wanted to this year, and that's one of my television Nerd Year's resolutions coming into this year was to watch all of Lost. And luckily, last year, I decided to watch The Wire, and my wife's not really into cop shows that much, so it was kind of one of those things. I wasn't necessarily watching it in secret by any means, but it was like when we were hanging out, obviously we weren't watching The Wire because she wasn't interested in it. So it's like I would kind of have to sneak an episode in every once in a while with The Wire. But luckily, with this Nerd Year's resolution, she actually really wanted to watch Lost with me, so it's been kind of our thing, which made it a lot easier to kind of get through it a lot quicker. Not that I'm trying to get it out of the way or anything like that, but it is kind of cool when she's into that kind of stuff, and so we can kind of do it together. And so we've actually, in the last couple of weeks, I think is when we started, we've actually about halfway through the second season. So we're actually going through it pretty quickly. They're an hour episode. So, I mean, we're watching it on Hulu, so it's 45 minutes. But each season is 23 to 25 episodes. So it's kind of like the X-Files. It's quite a chore to get through it. So this show is kind of interesting because it's been out for so long and I've heard such great things with it. But I've also kind of heard the first thing that most people tell me when I tell them that I haven't seen the show is man, you should watch it. It's really great. And then the second thing is they're not going to answer all of your questions. And so it's kind of a weird headspace that I'm in watching this show. Cause I understand that it's not all about the destination. It's about the journey. But at the same time, I don't want to get too excited. I'm trying to keep my expectations in check because I don't want to get too excited because I don't want to really get into a certain aspect of the show and then that be one of the things that they don't flesh out. So it's kind of a weird way to watch a TV show and I wouldn't necessarily suggest it for other people, but it's just kind of where I'm at with this show right now because I'm really, really digging it. But at the same time, like I said, I don't want to get too attached to a certain aspect of the show because I don't know if that's going to be something that they don't necessarily flesh out. But there's some really interesting stuff. I will say that one thing that they do really focus on in this show, and it's something that we harp on a lot on this podcast, is characters. We really need to care about these characters and we really need to be invested in these characters. And I think Lost, even though it doesn't seem too interested in explaining some of the stuff that's happening, like the polar bear and the numbers and all this stuff, it doesn't seem, at least at this point, that they're too interested in explaining that stuff, but they have really kind of fleshed out some of these characters, especially their backstory. in like these flashbacks that you get to see them off the island, which I think is a really interesting way to not only give these characters more backstory and more emotion and more character development, but it also kind of keeps the show fresh a little bit, because you don't always have to see these characters on the island. It kind of gives the show an excuse to see them off the island and kind of check in with who they were as characters before the crash. And so I think that's kind of interesting. One thing that I have noticed about this show, and I mean, it's kind of typical when you have these shows on TV, is you don't always get the best actors. And this show was really, really popular when it was out. And I know the ratings dipped as the show went along, but I mean, it was really just kind of took the television world by storm, especially the first couple of seasons. And so you think it would be kind of this jumping off point for these certain actors, like it's for their careers anyways. And I think there's a reason why you don't see a lot of these actors in much after this show, because they're not good. Most of them are not good actors. And so it's kind of cringe-worthy at times to watch them. If Matthew Fox, who is not a good actor, is the leader of this group, which he clearly is, this character is, and you could tell that he is above and beyond the talent of anybody around him. It's pretty scary to think about, because he is really not a good actor and you don't really see him in too much. And there's another quick nitpick that I have with this show, and our buddy Matt Hurt from The Obsessive Viewer is a huge Lost fan. It might actually be his favorite show if you were to ask him. Jack is Matthew Fox's character in the show, and he is the only doctor on this island that we know of, but yet he always volunteers for every dangerous mission that they go on, and there's no fucking way that I would ever allow him to, like, if I was on the island, I would put him in like a little bubble. Like, you're the only doctor. Why the fuck are you doing all this stupid shit? Like, literally, one of the last episodes, and it might be like the season finale of the first season, there is a guy, and they're looking for this dynamite to blow this hatch, and this guy comes with him, and he's kind of he's not really a main character, he's kind of a bit character in the show. You only see him every once in a while, and he comes with them, and they're picking out this dynamite, and then all of a sudden, spoiler alert, the show's been off the air for a while now, but he blows up, because the dynamite's old and kind of wet, and it blows him up. But then they still decide to take the dynamite, and Matthew Fox's character has a stick in his backpack. And I'm like, what the fuck? You just saw a man explode. You're the only doctor on the island. Fuck you. Go away. Like, you don't need to be doing this right now. It seems really, really silly. But, other than that, and, other than the bad acting and a few nitpicks here and there, I'm really enjoying the show. I'm just kind of in a weird headspace with it, because, like I said, I know the reputation of this show not wanting to answer a lot of the questions that fans have, and I know that a lot of people had some problems with the series finale, so I'm trying to keep my expectations in check, and it's just kind of a weird headspace I'm in with this show.
Yeah, I'll never watch this show. I'll take Gilligan's Island, I think. No, that's funny. You mentioned the cast of the show. The only thing I know about the cast of this show is that the one guy married like a 12-year-old or something, right? Like
I have no idea what you're talking about. So
yeah, like an old guy. I think his name is Doug or something. He married like a 16-year-old.
Really? Locke?
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
I don't fucking know.
You've never seen the show. No, I mean, the older character is named Locke, and he's kind of a fucking creep in the show anyways. So apparently he took that part of the character into his real life.
Doesn't sound like it was much of a stretch for him.
No, he's a super creep in the show.
No, but you mentioned how luckily your wife is interested in watching this with you and has been watching this with you. I kind of had the opposite thing with one of my Nerd Year resolutions. So a few episodes ago, I talked about how I was rewatching Roseanne, and I had been doing it by myself, and it was fine. And then my wife started watching it with me, and that's great because I enjoy watching it with her. But now it's kind of one of those things where she tells me not to watch it without her. So that's been a pain in the ass, because there's been times like this morning after I watched Cloverfield Paradox, I would have liked to have watched a few episodes of Roseanne before recording, but I had to wait for her, which was lame.
Yeah, it's kind of a give and take with that sort of thing, because especially when you get into a show and then you have to wait. Because, I mean, obviously you're both busy people, so your schedules don't always align with everything that you do. So it's like, oh man, I want to keep watching, but she's got to go to bed because she's got to work in the morning or something like that. It's kind of a give and take, because like I said, you want to watch more episodes, but you know you have to wait, because then you either have to rewatch it, or she's going to get pissed that you went on without her.
Exactly, man. So, yeah, whatever. You ready to move on to comics?
For sure. What'd you read this week?
So, I read Rock Candy Mountain, number 8, which I've talked about a few times on the podcast, but again, this book is written and drawn by Kyle Starks, who I've gushed about multiple times through this segment, whether it's Rock Candy Mountain or Sex Castle or Dead of Winter, a lot of things that he's written that I've loved. But the reason that I'm bringing it up one more time is because issue 8 is the final issue of Rock Candy Mountain. And since that's the case, I thought it would be fitting to discuss it one last time. And so if you are just now catching up and you haven't heard me talk about this book before, as a reminder, it is a self-proclaimed kung fu hobo epic. So at its heart, Starks describes this as the story of how far one man will go for his family, which he tells a story at the end of this issue, and relates it to how he entered the comic book world as his sole job, writing and drawing comic books. And I thought that was pretty cool. But when I think back on this 8-issue miniseries, it's really crazy to think just how good of a story it really is from start to finish. I've talked about the comedy in this comic series before, and just to reiterate, it is hilarious, but Starks has also, delivered some emotional stuff as well in this arc. As far as the comedy is concerned, though, like, it's obvious to see why Kyle Starks writes for the Rick and Morty comic, because his brand of humor is in line with that brand, but it's by no means identical. And this whimsical world of hobos is brought to life through his funny dialogue and situations. And like I mentioned, there's also that emotional element to it as well. It goes a lot deeper than the comedy aspect. And some of the character moments, especially with Jackson, the main hobo, carry some real weight. I mentioned at the top of this segment that, this is a story that at its core is about a guy doing anything for his family. And that carries the emotional side of issue 8 pretty far. On top of blending, the more dramatic elements in the comedy really well, action is also a big part of this comic, and the hobo fights are fantastic. My favorite part of this comic is when there's a hobo fight going on, Starks has kind of coined the phrase "fucked," F-U-C-K-T, and he uses it in place of like the bams and whams you would get in the 60s Batman TV show, and it's fucking hilarious every time I see it. And I've seen a lot of praise for Rock Candy Mountain on Twitter, and it's all well deserved. It's a shame that this series only went 8 issues, but what we're left with is a really straightforward story with great pacing that will make you laugh through the whole journey. I know that I've blown this comic before multiple times, but I just couldn't give up my final opportunity to blow it once again and just reiterate what I've said a few times over its 8-issue run, that you should do yourself a favor and go pick this up, because it really was quite fantastic.
Yeah, I'm always happy when you bring up this book, because then I can also bring up that I'm like the best friend ever and got you an autographed copy of I believe it was the first issue. He, as you've mentioned many times before, is from Evansville, the creator of this series, and every once in a while he will pop in to our local comic book shop. Well, I guess it's my local comic book shop now that you've moved, and he will sign a few issues here and there, and I was lucky to pick one up at cover price, which I was surprised that they were still selling it at cover price, which I thought was pretty cool. and I got it for you. So I always like when you bring this up, because then I can bring up that I am like the best friend ever and got you this autographed copy of it, because I know how much you like having autographed copies of comic books.
Yeah, I mean, I won't deny that. Unfortunately, I won't be able to bring this comic up anymore, but I do have that book framed up on my wall right now. So
Sweet.
Thanks again, man.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime I could help and also get credit for it on the podcast, for sure.
All right, dude. What'd you read this week?
So I read a giant issue this week. They had a Swamp Thing winter special come out. I guess it was either this week or last week. I mean, it came out just recently. I'm not quite sure exactly when it came out, but it was an 80-page issue. And with a lot of these like winter special or like anniversary issues or something like that are kind of double issues, or in this case, like extra long issues, it's not just one story. It'll be multiple, like just regular stories that they've put together in one book. And I was not aware of this, but this was also kind of a tribute issue, because one of the co-creators of Swamp Thing, Lynn Wein, just recently passed not too long ago. And so this was kind of their way of paying tribute to him and his work, which I thought was really, really cool. And I've always been drawn to the character of Swamp Thing. Even as a kid, I thought he looked really, really cool. I love monsters, and I was always kind of drawn to the character because he just looks like this really cool swamp monster, and I always just thought he looked cool. And then as I've grown up, I started to appreciate the character for what he is, which is this really well-developed character that, yeah, he looks like a monster, but he's actually like this really sweet guy that only wants to take care of the forest and the animals. And I don't really care that much about the forest, but I am a bit of an animal lover. So the fact that he is trying to protect the forest and protect the animals in the forest, I've always kind of related to. Like, my wife gets pissed off because I won't even like kill spiders or bugs or anything that get in the house, because I'm not that way. Like, I don't feel like I have the right to take a life. So yeah, I've always kind of related to that character because of that. And so I liked him as a kid because I thought he looked cool, and I've liked him more and more as I've grown up. And so what they did with this particular issue, like I said, it's 80 pages, so there's a couple of stories within it. The first story is really, really cool because I love winter. I grew up in upstate New York and New Hampshire for a good chunk. I've moved around a lot as a kid, and I spent a lot of time there, and so the winters were really long in upstate New York and New Hampshire. So it kind of, anytime I watch a movie that has winter as kind of a theme in it, or a comic book or a TV show, it kind of reminds me of growing up. And so I'm always kind of drawn to stuff like that. I really like winter as a season. I hate driving in it, but as long as I can avoid that, I think it's really, really cool. I love snow. So the first kind of miniature story in this book was like the Swamp Thing going through like a desert of snow, and he kind of encounters a few things along the way, obviously, because that would be really boring if it was just him walking. But it kind of empathizes what I was just talking about as him being like this grotesque monster, but in reality, he's this really sweet guy, and he just wants to protect the forest and the animals. And so that first story was great on multiple levels for me, because you have what I like the most about the character, but then also you have this winter theme with the story as well. So I really like that first story. And the second story is a little interesting because apparently Lynn Wein, the co-creator of Swamp Thing, he was working on a follow-up to one of his Swamp Thing stories that he had done a while back, and he didn't get to finish it when he passed. And so basically, as a tribute, they released the story outline that he had finished for the story, and they also actually had finished the artwork and the coloring, but he hadn't finished the dialogue yet. So they released it in this winter special. They released the outline so you could read kind of what he had, his ideas for the story. And then you could look at the artwork and you could kind of piece it together, but there was no dialogue, because basically they said that they didn't think that they were going to be able to write dialogue like he wrote the dialogue, so they didn't want to hire somebody to come in and write it a lesser version of what he would have been able to do. And so I thought that was kind of a sweet tribute. Now there's probably a hidden agenda there because I'm cynical and they probably just didn't want to pay somebody else to do it. But I thought it was kind of cool that at least in some aspect, they were kind of trying to pay tribute to him by just releasing the last story that he was working on and kind of releasing it the way that his story and not necessarily coming in and trying to finish it on their own. Because I always think that that's kind of weird when people come in and find like old manuscripts of authors and try to finish the book themselves after the author has passed. I think that's just kind of a weird thing to do. And so I never really liked that. So I thought it was kind of cool that they did that, and you can kind of see where the story was going. But unfortunately, obviously, you don't have the dialogue. And honestly, we've talked about this before, but we love movies about making movies. And I think it's really cool when you kind of get a peek at the backstages, I guess, of creating stuff like this. And so you kind of get a peek at how comics are put together. And so I thought that was really cool. And then the last few pages of this winter special is just kind of like a tribute, kind of talking about him as a person and him as a comic creator. So if you're a fan of this character and kind of want to know more about who created this character or helped create this character, I would definitely suggest picking it up. It is $8, so it is quite costly. So if that's a problem for you, I definitely would say maybe skip it. But I really, really enjoyed it.
Len Wein created Wolverine too, right?
I don't know if he created him. I know that he worked on it early in the character's history. So I know he was a Wolverine writer for a while there, but I'm not sure if he actually created him or not. I know he created a lot of big characters in not just DC, but Marvel as well.
So he co-created Wolverine.
Awesome.
So which character do you like more, Swamp Thing or Wolverine?
I would go with Swamp Thing just because the hipster in me doesn't want to go with like the popular pick of Wolverine, but I think they're both really solid characters. I think that I like the Swamp Thing as a character a little bit more. Wolverine, even though he is a badass, can be kind of one note at certain points, and I really like the more diverse character in Swamp Thing.
Since I know that you will not ask me back which one I like more because you're a self-centered asshole.
I also know the answer to that because I know that you're not a huge Wolverine fan to begin with.
Yeah, but I still want to say it again. No, definitely Swamp Thing. And it's not even a DC Marvel thing. I think I said it whenever we recently talked about Logan again, that that's just not a character that I think that he's extremely one-dimensional. So it's always cool to see his dynamic whenever he's like with the X-Men, I think. But whenever he's on his own, which it seems like more often than not he is, I'm not too interested. So yeah, I think Swamp Thing's definitely, I would say it's more of a unique character or like an original character, but what's the Marvel version? Is it Man Thing?
Yeah, so I think I've talked about this before because I always thought that Man Thing was a bit of a ripoff of Swamp Thing, but apparently it's kind of the other way around. Yeah. I guess Man Thing came out like a year before Swamp Thing did, and I think Marvel thought about suing DC, but I don't think I ever heard, like, I don't think anything ever came of it.
Yeah, so it's hard to say it's too original, but obviously Swamp Thing has had more success than Man Thing.
For sure.
So yeah, I think that it's a character that's been honestly underutilized, especially in this world of, live action comic book movies. I can't believe there's not, there is a Swamp Thing movie from way back when, right?
Yeah, there is.
But obviously he hasn't been reintroduced in this new age of comic book entertainment, so.
I want to say Wes Craven did it. It's somebody that I like and know.
That sounds right. I want to say you're right.
Yeah, and I wish Swamp Thing was better in Injustice. Like, I just
Yeah.
don't like him as, like, I mean, he looks badass because he always looks badass. But as a character, the way that I play Injustice and Injustice 2 is I want to string together combos, and he just really doesn't have that cool of a combo set.
I know we're getting a little off topic here, but I saw you had posted something to our Facebook with the announcement of the Turtles coming to Injustice. Are you planning on revisiting that game?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm really excited because the gameplay trailer that we finally saw for TMNT, we still haven't gotten an official release date when they're going to come to the game, but it's sometime this month. It's really, really cool because I was kind of afraid that it was going to be one of those things where you could only like pick Leo and you could do like some throws and some tag teams where you could have the other turtles in it. But apparently you can choose any of the turtles, which I think is really, really cool. So, and Donnie looks awesome. Like the little that you get to see him in the gameplay trailer, he looks like he's going to have some pretty awesome combos. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. And I'm going to bring that game back to the YouTube channel for a little bit once TMNT gets released again.
Nice. Yeah, I stopped playing that game too soon. Like I was starting to get pretty good at it, and then I quit. So I would, if I jump back into it, I'd be terrible, I know, but the Turtles do have my interest peaked. So I don't know, I might go back to it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm just afraid that it's going to be super expensive to buy them. Like, I'm thinking like 10, 15 bucks for a DLC is a little much for me, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. So you ready to move on to nerd news?
Yeah, what do you got this week?
So this is a special all-trailer edition of Nerd News because not really many other stories broke this week. And of course, our last episode we recorded before the Super Bowl. So since then, there have been quite a few trailers released. So I thought we'd run through these. The first one I teased last week because I knew it was going to be shown in the Super Bowl and then again on Monday on Good Morning America, and that's Solo. So we finally got the full-length trailer for Solo, and I think that there's been some mixed reactions to it. For me, I didn't really see anything in it that made me scared necessarily. Like, it didn't blow me away. Like, oh my God, I can't wait for May. This is going to be amazing. But it didn't look bad to me. I just don't think that we've seen enough to know one way or another.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm leaning towards, with everything that's happened with this film and just the fact that I never really thought that it was a special idea anyways to have like an origin story for Han Solo, even though I really like that character. I just didn't think that you could do it without Harrison Ford, and there's just so much. The deck is stacked against this particular film, and I just didn't see anything in this trailer that led me to believe anything other than the fact that this movie is going to be disappointing.
Yeah, I'm a sucker, though, for this kind of shit. Like, you show me Jabba the Hutt, like, being a full-on gangster on Tatooine, and I'm in. So, we'll see. I mean, I don't know what kind of actor Alden, I don't even know how to say his last name, Einrich, is. And I don't know if he's going to, make Han Solo his own or do a Harrison Ford impression or what. But, I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we want this to be good. We never root against a Star Wars movie. I don't feel like, especially with this trailer, which is what we're talking about, I just don't think that there's anything in it that leads me to believe or changes my opinion. The fact that I think this is going to be a mediocre at best movie.
We will see in May, I suppose. So
For sure.
The next trailer actually didn't come out during the Super Bowl. It just was released through the week, and that is Deadpool 2. So finally a full-length trailer for that movie as well. But I use that term loosely because half of the trailer is more or less Deadpool playing with action figures. So it is what it is, but we did get to see some actual footage from the movie, which looked pretty good. I could see this brand of humor getting tired at some point, but for now, I think that it's still fresh enough that it's going to do pretty well.
Yeah, and I said that, I think, when we reviewed Deadpool originally, when that movie first came out, that there's a really good joke density in that movie, but the hit percentage is not very high because there's so many jokes. And I think I said that I don't think that movie is as funny as it thinks it is. And I think that type of humor is going to wear on me a little bit more, or quicker than it will most. But I've really liked how they've promoted this movie. And we're going to talk about Cloverfield Paradox here in a little bit, and kind of, I'm going to touch on how they've promoted those movies in the past. And I think that Deadpool now, I mean, obviously they're not doing the crazy shit that Cloverfield is, but I really kind of like the way that they're promoting this movie, and they're not showing us a ton from the actual movie. And so I am always a fan of that. I think that they're definitely doing it in a very Deadpool-esque way. Like, you had the first trailer is kind of that Bob Ross trailer, which is nothing. I mean, you basically see nothing from the movie. So I really appreciate that. And then you really don't see a ton from the movie in this particular trailer either. I mean, you finally get to see Josh Brolin as Cable, which I thought was pretty cool. I thought they did a really good job with him. So I'm definitely interested. And like I said, I think that type of humor is going to wear on me a little bit, and maybe even in this movie, but I'm definitely looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah, I really like the poster they released this week too. That was kind of like a play on, I think, Flashdance is what it is. So I thought that was pretty funny too. But that movie comes out in May, right?
Yes, I thought that they moved. Did they move Solo to kind of get away from Deadpool 2? They moved something recently, and I heard a story that it was kind of to get away from that movie in May.
I don't know. I haven't heard, or I didn't see.
Okay.
But, yeah, speaking of trailers that don't show you anything from the movie, let's talk about the Venom trailer.
Okay.
Did you watch it?
Yes, I watched it, and so there's been a lot of shit made about this trailer.
Yeah.
And I didn't particularly like the trailer, but I did not dislike it for the same reasons that most people disliked it. So, as you kind of alluded to in your introduction to this trailer, you kind of mentioned that they didn't really show a whole lot in this trailer, and I think most notably they didn't show Venom in the Venom trailer, and I think that's most people, I know it's most people's gripe with this particular trailer. And honestly, I don't give a shit about that. Like, it's a teaser trailer. I'm definitely in the camp of not wanting to see a ton from these movies, and this movie is going to come out in October. This is not going to be the only trailer that we see. We're going to see plenty of Venom in the 6 other trailers that we're going to get for this movie before October. So I think people just need to get a fucking grip and realize that you're going to see it eventually. This is a teaser trailer, the first teaser trailer we've seen for this movie. So just hold your fucking horses for a second. We're going to see Venom. My problem is, I've been saying all along that I really wanted them to kind of do more of a horror movie with this particular character, and that's what they said that they were going to try to do. And I just didn't get that vibe with this teaser trailer. And I mean, it's only like a minute and a half or 2 minutes, whatever. And so we don't see a ton of the actual footage from the movie. So it's hard to judge, but I didn't get that same feel. Like, the new Mutants trailer felt like just a horror movie that had mutants in it. That's what I wanted from this trailer, and that's not what I got. So I was disappointed in this trailer, but for a different reason than most people were.
So, I mean, I don't know. I don't, there's not enough to this trailer to say one way or the other that it's like there is horror elements or there aren't horror elements for me. Like, I think that there's a horror vibe there. So I don't think in the long run you'll be too disappointed. At least I hope you won't. My thing is, so I'm not necessarily in the camp that is, you have to show us Venom in the Venom trailer. Like, I get it. It's a teaser. I remember the first Dark Knight teaser that was literally just audio and the bat signal. So, like, I get that a teaser's a teaser and we're 9 months away from this movie. I think my frustration has been, like they put out the first promo image of this movie and it's just Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
Like our first look at Eddie Brock, but Eddie Brock is just Tom Hardy with some dumb fucking bracelets on. So, you know,
I thought he had
fine.
some pretty sick bracelet game.
I forgot you're a bracelet guy.
Yeah, I'm for sure a bracelet guy.
But you know, that is what it is. I don't need to see like full on Venom in this trailer, but I think that you need to give some kind of hint of Venom. And you get that a little bit with Tom Hardy when he's like laying in the hospital and you see, I guess his veins getting a little black. But I don't know. I just think that it's too much of a tease, I guess. I don't know. I get it. We're 9 months away from that movie. So like you said, Sony's not going to be able to hold their load for 9 months. They're going to end up giving away the entire plot before that film comes out, I'm sure. But the teaser to me just didn't really do anything to get me excited for the film.
And honestly, what I hated the most about all this is the fact that people freaked out so much about it, and Sony is so fickle that now we're going to see everything there is to see about Venom before this movie comes out, because they're going to read everything about this teaser trailer and everybody bitching about it. And so they're going to overreact to it, because that's what fucking Sony does. And so we're going to see so much of Venom in the next 10 trailers that we're going to see for this fucking movie.
Oh, for sure. Sony is the internet's bitch.
Oh yeah,
so
for sure.
It definitely happened. So one more story, and it's a kind of a segment that we started a while ago, and we don't really revisit that often. But you and I were kind of texting back and forth during the Super Bowl as these trailers were going on, and whenever Skyscraper, the trailer starring Dwayne Johnson, came up, you texted me trailer trash for sure. So I had to throw this in there because it is indeed trailer trash. Like I give The Rock the benefit of the doubt at this point. Like he's proven to be the king of the box office. Like Jumanji's still the #1 movie up. I think this weekend the new 50 Shades of Grey movie is going to overtake it, but it was like the #1 movie for a month and a half. Like I get it. The Rock has star power, but between this and Rampage, it looks like he's kind of shit the bed a little bit. Like the Skyscraper specifically looks super bad. And I think that the fact that The Rock has a prosthetic leg in this movie got more screen time than The Rock himself, which was kind of strange.
Yeah, I kind of almost regretted texting you the trailer trash thing, because I don't think it necessarily qualifies for trailer trash if I'm not convinced that it's an actual movie. I am not 100% convinced that this is actually a movie. Like it felt like just kind of like how I felt with the Dundee trailer. Like it felt fishy. Like there's something else going on with this movie, because there's no way that this movie gets made. Like it just seemed like it felt like a movie that people in a movie go see, like a joke movie. And literally that's how I felt while I was watching it. I was like, okay, where's the product placement? Like, where's the joke in this? Cause this is not a real thing. And then it just kept going on. It's like they can't back out now. And they have that stupid fucking poster where he's jumping to the skyscraper from forever away. And it's crazy. I don't understand, because I thought that The Rock had turned a corner there. Like, cause when he first started acting, he was basically doing anything that people would give him, to do. And I felt like he was finally starting to turn the corner a little bit with Jumanji and some of the other things that he was doing. And now he's doing Skyscraper and Rampage that you brought up. It's just Rampage. I mean, we haven't talked about yet on the podcast, but come on. Like we played that when we were in Indy. We went to a bar that was an arcade bar, and you played it with a stranger for a while, and then I had to take over for you, and I never played it before, and the stranger was getting angry at me because I'm garbage at the game. But it's basically, I mean, if you haven't played it, it's a giant gorilla and a giant wolf that destroy skyscrapers. So maybe Skyscraper is a prequel to Rampage. I'm not sure, but I mean, that's the whole game. And then they decided to make a fucking movie out of that. Like I don't even get it. It's fucking weird.
They give the albino gorilla a really sweet backstory as well, where he's like the Rock's best friend too. So I don't know. That one might be that might pull on the old heartstrings a little bit.
As stupid as that trailer in that movie looks, if Andy Serkis was playing the gorilla, I'd go fucking see it.
You will go. I bet you end up seeing that movie.
I probably will, but I mean, that's what MoviePass does for you, is you see a lot of stupid shit.
Yep. When it decides to work, you're absolutely right.
You have more problems?
No, I have. Well, so I didn't want to get into a rant about MoviePass by any means, but so I had problems checking in when I went to see Hostiles a few weeks ago, and I sent them a message on their contact support on my phone and still haven't seen anything. And I saw their Twitter was telling people that had issues to DM them the information. So I just DM'd them my problem and a screenshot of the chat I had sent contact or customer support, and have not heard back from either yet. So it used to be the thing with MoviePass was, sometimes the movie times weren't correct on the app, but you could just call right away and they check you in, and they had fantastic customer service. And since, their user base has expanded, it's become absolutely terrible customer service. So, $10 a month is just a drop in the bucket. So it's not been too bad, but it is kind of irritating, I will say.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I definitely saw that when it took a month and a half for me to get my card, and I reached out to them and I got nothing for a long time. It's pretty ridiculous how they've changed so much. Like, that was a big thing, that you were always constantly telling me when I was trying to decide whether or not I was going to get it when it was like $30 a month, was that their customer service was just great. And I experienced that too. Like, if you went and their movie times wasn't listed, or it was different on their app than it was actually at the movie theater, you could call them and they'd answer right away, and they were really cool, and they'd check you in right away. And I mean, you can't get a hold of their customer service anymore.
No, not at all. So definitely a pain in the ass. I haven't seen a movie in theater since Hostiles, but obviously Black Panther comes out next weekend. So if I have an issue checking into Black Panther, I'm going to be pretty pissed off. So I'll keep you updated.
For sure. All right. So our next segment is just kind of our main topic. It changes from episode to episode. If this is your first episode, thank you for joining us. We usually review a movie or TV series or something in the main topic, but honestly, it's been a really bad dead period recently with movies. Like, we always say that around this time, that there's always a dead period with Oscar season and award season. This is probably, I would say, the worst year since we started this podcast, of it just being completely dead around this time. Now, that being said, I've really enjoyed our list episodes, and we did the Rotten Tomatoes film draft and our top 10. So we've had some stuff to talk about for sure, but it seems like as far as movies are concerned, it's been a really, really shitty time. Luckily, one of the trailers that we saw during the Super Bowl that we didn't talk about was for the Cloverfield Paradox, and they did a really Cloverfield-esque thing with this movie, is they released the trailer, and then right after the Super Bowl, you could see the movie. So we decided then and there that we were going to review this movie for the next episode of the podcast. The Cloverfield Paradox was directed by Julius Onah, which is not a director that I had ever heard of, and I looked it up after I saw this movie, and he has done a lot of shorts, and he did like one full feature film, and I never heard of it. So I kind of, normally with these directors and these movies that we review, you at least have heard of one of the things that they have done. But with this particular director, I hadn't heard anything. This movie was actually originally called God Particle. It wasn't going to be a Cloverfield movie at first, but then it was kind of taken over by JJ and Bad Robot, and they kind of morphed it into the next Cloverfield, which I know Tyler had a problem with 10 Cloverfield Lane, but I honestly don't think that that's that big of a deal. Like, I kind of like that idea. I mean, I love the Cloverfield franchise in general, and I kind of like the idea of them building a different type of movie franchise, because we have all of these movie universes and all these direct sequels. And I mean, I love those movies, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of nice to have that breath of fresh air. They kind of build their franchise a little bit differently. And so I thought that was a really cool idea. Just take a really fun and interesting script and then just make it a Cloverfield movie.
I was incredibly pumped when I saw the trailer for this movie during the Super Bowl. It said, like, I think the tag was coming very soon. And I was like, holy shit, are they going to release this tonight? And lo and behold, of course they did. And I thought that was such amazing marketing. Like the biggest televised event of the year, saying like, hey, this movie that you just saw a trailer for that you're probably pretty jazzed about because you know the Cloverfield franchise, you can literally watch this as soon as the Super Bowl's over. So I thought that was amazing. And I was super excited for it. But, obviously, we'll get into our review here. I hope that the negative reviews that are coming out for this movie doesn't keep Netflix from doing things like this in the future. But yeah, cool marketing, bad execution.
Yeah, I highly doubt that it's going to keep them from doing it because just like Bright got destroyed by critics and it still made, according to Netflix, I mean, it did well enough for them to already greenlight a sequel. So we'll see how this movie does. Much has been made about how this film kind of came to Netflix, and I'm just going to go right into broad strokes if you don't mind. So, kind of what you said kind of leads me into my broad strokes. So, much has been made how this film came to Netflix, and like you just said, it was kind of awesome that we see the first trailer and then hours later we actually get to see the film. That doesn't obviously happen very often, if ever. I don't think I've ever heard of something do a film do something like that. And the Super Bowl actually was a great game, and it was really quick because there was very few punts. And so I was watching this movie by like 9:30 that night. So that was really, really cool. And it felt like the most Cloverfield thing they could have done. But unfortunately, the film itself was so dreadfully boring that by the end of the film, it felt like they didn't do it. They didn't market it like that because it was the Cloverfield brand. It felt by the end of the movie that they knew that they had such a shitty movie on their hands that they were just dumping it. Like, and I've read some articles that they theorize, some people are theorizing that it's because now negative reviews don't always necessarily financially impact a movie like you would think they would, but it does have an impact on a movie. Like, casual movie fans won't go see a movie if it has bad reviews. And so people are theorizing that they knew that this movie was going to be bad and they still wanted people to go see it, obviously, or see it on Netflix. So they just dumped it in hopes that critics wouldn't have enough time to throw together a bad review of it, so people would see it before they saw the reviews. And honestly, after seeing this movie, I completely agree with that. Like, I completely buy this because it just feels like they dumped it on Netflix, tried to get as much people coming from the Super Bowl as possible, kind of interested in the way that they marketed this movie, try to get as many people into it before they could realize that it was bad and read some reviews. And honestly, after I saw this, because the way that we record these episodes is normally we'll see the movie that we're reviewing on Thursday or Friday, and then we'll review it Saturday or Sunday. So we usually don't have a ton of time to digest this movie. And so I watched it right after the Super Bowl. So it's been a week since I've seen this movie. And I actually briefly considered watching the original Cloverfield movie and then watching this movie again. But after seeing it the first time, like, the thought of watching it again, because it was so boring, just like made me nauseous. So I have not watched it again because one is enough for me.
No, you brought up some really good points there. And something I just thought about is, a lot of times the production costs of a movie are equally matched by the costs to promote it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they paid, a few $1 million probably for the TV spots that they had during the Super Bowl, but that pales in comparison to, putting out commercials and putting out posters and attaching the trailer to other movies. So they actually probably got by pretty cheap on the promotional side of the budget. So I wouldn't be surprised if they came out ahead here.
I know it was at Paramount or Universal that owned this movie originally. They already made a profit because the budget, I think, was like $26 billion, and Netflix, which I cannot believe they did this, paid $50 million for this movie. So the studio that originally was going to put this out has already made a profit. Now, I don't know exactly how Netflix works as far as that's concerned, but I mean, this movie would have to be pretty popular on their site to make it worth $50 million. And I'm assuming the movie studio wouldn't have to pay for any of the promotion. That would all be Netflix.
Yeah, correct. I mean, overall, this movie shouldn't exist.
For sure.
Like you said, like this was originally a movie called God Particle, and it was kind of shoehorned into the Cloverfield universe by JJ. And by all accounts, the God Particle script was awful, and this is better than what we would have gotten for a movie that wasn't connected to the Cloverfield universe, but it's still not great. I think that the space horror genre is kind of tired, and I don't think it's ever going to be done better than it already has, in my opinion, especially with movies like Alien. So overall, what we're left with is just a convoluted movie that, like you said, is extremely boring. Like, it was such a chore to watch this for the review.
Yeah, so you brought up the space survival type of movie, and I believe it was last year when we talked about a movie somewhat similar, at least in the same genre as this movie, Life, and we kind of mocked it a little bit. We didn't do a full review, but I think it was what one of us was into one episode, and we kind of talked about how it was basically just flat out an Alien ripoff. I honestly would watch that movie again before I would watch this movie. At least shit happens in Life. I mean, it's just an Alien ripoff for sure, but I would definitely watch an Alien ripoff more than this boring fucking mess of a movie.
Absolutely, man.
All right, so let's dive right into the story. So for me, this movie made a lot of mistakes, but there was two main ones that I want to touch on. First, for me anyways, and I don't know if I'm in the minority or not, but for me, the fact that these Cloverfield movies don't tie into each other is a plus for me. Like, I like that about this franchise. Like I said, I think it's a breath of fresh air to have a different type of franchise, kind of have a Twilight Zone-esque type of movie franchise. And our buddy from the Obsessive Viewer, Matt Hurt, really, when they were talking about this 10 Cloverfield Lane, really kind of hit the nail on the head, where he just kind of says that it's a brand, it's a stamp, kind of like Twilight Zone, like it's an anthology type of film franchise, and I really appreciated that. I really thought that comparison is very spot on, and so I've kind of taken it for myself, kind of taken that thing that he said about 10 Cloverfield Lane and kind of used it in my own discussion of this film franchise. And for some reason, I don't know if other people wanted these movies to tie together, like if they were like begging JJ to have a movie that ties these movies together. I don't know, but why? Why did they do that? Like, why did they have to have these movies tie together? Like, I just don't understand it. Get a cool script, make it a Cloverfield movie, have it kind of fit the tone of the Cloverfield franchise. That's all I need. And then just stamp it Cloverfield, and we will go see it, and we will love it. Like, I really loved 10 Cloverfield Lane because it felt like a Cloverfield movie. This, because they tried to tie it in to Cloverfield, just didn't feel like it had that same tone to it. And I mean, it's just a god-awful movie, and it's a super boring story, but it just felt like they cared more about tying these movies together than they really cared about making an interesting movie. And that was the first problem of the two main problems I had with the movie. The second one, and it's going to sound kind of weird because it's not a time travel movie per se, but I've talked about this just in length in past episodes, but I hate time travel movies mostly because I don't dislike the idea of time travel. I just think that time travel movies and shows spend way too much time over explaining how the time travel works. And this movie kind of felt like they took those problems that I have with those types of movies and brought it to this movie. Like, it's not a time travel movie per se, but they over-explain all the science and the multi-dimension bullshit over and over and over again, and I just didn't care about it. I just wanted the movie to get somewhere, and it never did. They just really thought that we were going to be really interested in all this stupid shit that happens to these people because they've opened up this portal to this other dimension, and I don't know, this multiverse, I guess you could call it. And I'm not interested in that shit at all. And it just felt like a really boring time travel movie because of it.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. So I've gone back and said before, like, you know, I was kind of lukewarm on 10 Cloverfield Lane when we reviewed it, and that was because I was butthurt because it was doing so well on Rotten Tomatoes, and that was the first Rotten Tomatoes film draft we had done, and it was early in the year, and I was pissed off. So, like, you know, going back, like, I really do enjoy 10 Cloverfield Lane, and I would say I'm with you. Like, I don't need these movies to necessarily click together in a nice puzzle piece. I think that it's cool that, you know, maybe at the end of 10 Cloverfield Lane, what she's driving off to in the distance is some remnant of what happened in the original Cloverfield, especially since that namesake is, you know, the footprints that the giant monster leaves behind looks like a field of clovers. So I mean, I appreciate that. I don't need it to be spoon fed to me. Like, I didn't need a movie that was like, here's the connective tissue between those two other movies you like. That being said, I wouldn't necessarily agree that 10 Cloverfield Lane felt like a Cloverfield movie because we didn't know what a Cloverfield movie felt like because the first one was a found footage monster movie.
See, I disagree with you because I felt like the Cloverfield movie was, I don't really care so much about the found footage or the shaky cam aspect of that movie. And I honestly don't think that the monster plays that important of a role because I think you take the monster out of Cloverfield and it's just like this natural disaster movie. And it's still a decent movie because the reason I love Cloverfield is because of the characters. They make interesting choices and they have interesting characters. Maybe not so much TJ Miller's character in that movie. His is kind of dull and stupid, but I really care about the characters, and that's what I really like about Cloverfield. And 10 Cloverfield Lane feels like a character study. Like, it's not necessarily about what's happening in the outside world, even though that does play a part. I think it fits the tone of the first movie, at least for me, because they make interesting characters, and I care about these characters.
Well, then any movie we review that has interesting characters in it and is a character study could be a Cloverfield movie. I think we know what a Cloverfield movie is now based on the two movies we have. But when it was done, it wasn't like, oh yeah, this is a Cloverfield movie. This is in the vein of the original, because the original feels nothing like 10 Cloverfield Lane.
But that's what I like about it. Like, I think you could make that argument about pretty much anything, but I mean, while I'm watching the movie, yeah, I'm not thinking, oh, this feels like a Cloverfield movie. It's in retrospect that I'm thinking about it as a whole that I am like, man, I like these characters and I feel like it fits as a franchise, but I really like the fact that they don't fit together. And other than in what I said, like in the tone and the characters feel, like they were crafted in the same vein as each other. So I don't need this connective tissue between the two of them. And I feel like in retrospect, you could say that about any movies. Like, oh, well, I think your argument of just good character development and good character study is kind of a shitty one because, I mean, you could say that about a lot of movies. And I know that's what the point you're trying to make, but they have this stamp as the Cloverfield movie, and as long as they have interesting characters and they kind of feel like they fit, I don't need this connective tissue.
I don't think that the Cloverfield brand is there because these movies feel like one another. It's there because it's something we recognize and it's going to sell some tickets and sell some seats. I don't think they did it artistically. And I might be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure 10 Cloverfield Lane didn't start off as a Cloverfield movie either, similar to God Particle.
No, and that's honestly, if this movie was better, then, and we're kind of getting off tracks from the actual movie that we're supposed to be reviewing, but I'm enjoying the conversation so far. But I think if this movie was better, then we'd be saying this is how they need to build their franchise. Because I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that you take a script, as long as it's an interesting script. Now, we don't know what the original script for 10 Cloverfield Lane was, but I think if you can find an interesting script and make it a Cloverfield movie, that's not a bad way to build the franchise. If you can make an interesting movie that feels tonally like the other movies, which we're just going to have to agree to disagree, but I feel like 10 Cloverfield Lane and Cloverfield do fit in that sense. I think that it's a fine way to build a franchise. Unfortunately, they picked a really shitty script in this particular case.
And that's what I'm saying is they're 1 for 2. That's not a great record. So hopefully future movies, which
they're 2 for 3. I get what you're saying in this particular sense. Yeah.
Well, the first one was wasn't written into a franchise. It was written on its own.
Yeah.
So since doing that, they're 1 for 2. And I think that there already is a 4th one planned to come out next year, potentially. I read some rumors that Daisy Ridley's filming some movie right now that could potentially end up being a Cloverfield movie. And that's great. Hopefully it's better than Cloverfield Paradox. But, I don't think that it's been proven that it works just yet.
No, I definitely agree with you because I fucking hated this movie for sure. But I don't think it's necessarily, if they could have picked a better script for this movie, I don't think it's necessarily a bad way to build this franchise. Because like I said, I like the fact that it's different. Like they're doing it a different way. Now I hated this movie and it's by far the worst movie I've seen this year. I mean, it's not even close. I mean, I think I've only seen Hostiles as far as a 2018 movie, and I'm not even sure that necessarily qualifies because I think they tried to make that an Oscar movie this year, so technically it would be a 2017 movie. But yeah, those are the only 2 movies that really came out this year that I've seen, but by far this is the worst of the 2.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think that's, why we have gotten off topic so easily is because any conversation we're having about the Cloverfield franchise is a more interesting conversation than we could possibly have about this shitty movie.
Yeah, it was hard for me to even stay awake during this movie because, granted, I was seeing it after the Super Bowl, but like I said, it was a quick Super Bowl. So it wasn't really that late and it's really not that long of a movie. I've stayed up later than that and watched a movie before. It's just a fucking dreadfully boring movie. And trying to come up with these articulate notes for this movie was almost just as hard as watching this movie because it's hard to say interesting things about a movie that you just don't care about and will never think about after we have this conversation. So unless you're done, or unless you have more to say about the story.
So being completely honest with you, I had notes here for the story and I didn't really get to say any of them, but I don't really care to say any of them because I feel like I said, the conversation we just had about Cloverfield as a franchise is more interesting than anything I could have said about the shitty plot devices used in this movie and how it was confusing and didn't make sense and wasn't explained. So I'm good with just pretty much skipping over it, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. And it just felt like your typical space survival movie. And they felt like they didn't really know what they wanted to do with it. And so they just kind of threw a bunch of stuff at the wall and nothing stuck at all. So let's go ahead and move right on to the performances. And this is literally in my notes where I stopped taking notes because I was just like, well, there's nothing that jumps out at me with the performances. There's a few really talented people in this movie, and I don't know what could have drawn them to this movie at all. Because if this is a better version of the God Particle script, then what are these actors doing in this movie? Because from what I understand, they originally were making God Particle. the actors didn't know that this eventually was going to morph into a Cloverfield movie when they started production on it. So a lot of them signed on to this movie thinking that it was going to be this God particle movie. What the fuck in this script made you want to do this movie? Because it's so bad, and they were definitely phoning it in. Like, there's nobody in this movie that stood out to me that, oh, well, at least they rose above the material or whatever. I think the only person that stuck out to me as being not good at all, but surprisingly bad, for me at least, because I'm a fan of him in the IT crowd, is Chris O'Dowd or Dowd, or yeah, however you pronounce that, his last name. I think he's a really funny guy, and he was definitely used as comic relief, but it felt forced. Like, it didn't feel like it fit the movie at all, which kind of leads me back to what I was saying, because them just trying to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and none of it really stuck. And so his character was definitely used as comic relief that just didn't work at all, and his performance was really cringe-worthy.
Yeah, whenever I saw the teaser, I was excited. I'm like, holy shit, Daniel Bruhl's in this movie, and Chris O'Dowd and Elizabeth Debicki, and I was kind of excited for this cast, but you're right. They all definitely phone it in. Chris O'Dowd specifically, I think that, I love him. I think that he's a great comedic actor, and like you said, he is the comic relief of this movie, but it's written so poorly that it just comes across as really bad and out of place, like you mentioned. So I think that that's pretty much a good description for everyone's performance in this movie. Like, it's just written so bad. Even some of these great actors like Daniel Bruhl can't really rise above it.
Yeah, I mean, we had an Oscar-nominated actor in this movie, and even he was pretty bad. And I'm not even going to try to butcher his name, so I'm not even going to go for it. But yeah, it's just the performances. I mean, like the movie, were just so forgettable because this movie was so boring. And I don't want to harp on Chris O'Dowd's performance, or O'Dowd's performance, but the whole arm thing was so fucking stupid. And they played it up as this like running gag throughout the movie, and it really sucked. It was really just such a stupid gag, and I hated it. And it really took me out of the movie. Not that I was really invested in this movie to begin with, but.
For sure. I actually had notes in my story, notes that I didn't end up going over about the fucking arm and how
it was so fucking stupid. It was so stupid.
Just awful.
But, the last segment that we usually talk about with these types of movies is the action. And there was almost none of it. There was almost nothing other than really the arm, I guess. But there was nothing else that really happens in this movie. It's just your typical space survival movie.
Yeah, I thought we would maybe touch on the horror elements of it, but I mean, whether it's action, whether it's horror, you can even comedy, any genre you want to throw into this segment, like, it was just completely underdeveloped. I think that there were some okay ideas in there, but all of it was poorly executed. Most of it just doesn't make sense in the grand scheme of the movie.
Yeah, for sure. It, again, just kind of felt like they just threw a bunch of stuff together and hoped that it worked, and none of it did.
For sure, man.
All right, so I guess that's it. I guess we will go ahead. It's been a while since we've done a review, so I kind of forgot how we ended this. But star rating out of 5 stars, would you give the Cloverfield Paradox?
I think I'm going to give it a 2.
Yeah, I kind of went back and forth between a 1.5 and a 2. I was really, really disappointed in this movie, and I think ultimately I'm going to give it a 2 just because I do like Cloverfield, and I'm kind of giving it the half star just because it's the Cloverfield movie, which I guess seems silly now that I'm saying it. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give it 2 stars. Hopefully it can rebound with the 4th movie, which we may see tonight or tomorrow. We never really know with these movies.
Huh. All right, man. You ready to cap this episode with a nerd favorite?
Yeah, what is it this week?
So sometimes these nerd favorites link up to something that we talked about in the episode, and sometimes they don't. And this is one of those times where they don't. I was driving to work yesterday and was just listening to a podcast that I listen to a lot, and they were talking about board games. And I was like, I don't think we've ever talked about what our favorite board game is on the podcast. Of course, we've talked about board games we've played or card games that we've played for what we're into, but I don't know that we've ever put a label on what our favorite is. So I want to know what your favorite board game is. And while you think about your answer, I will go ahead and throw mine out there. Mine is the board game that kind of elevated me to adult board games, and that is Risk. So, up until playing Risk in high school, I hadn't really revisited the idea of playing board games since I was a kid, playing Candyland or Chutes and Ladders or games like that. And playing Risk in high school really kind of opened the door to all of these other awesome games that are out there to play. And I've talked on the podcast before about how many hours my friends and I in high school sunk into Halo 2. And once Halo 2 kind of passed, specifically like in junior and senior year, a lot of weekends we spent playing Risk, and it was just so much fun. And like I said, it opened up the door to a bunch of other games. Like, Risk led to Pandemic, and Pandemic led to some other crazy things. And that's something that obviously we still do today. Especially when I was living in Evansville, we would have those game nights. So, Risk was kind of my introduction to all of that. And for that, I think it'll always hold a special place and be my favorite.
Yeah, I remember being invited to, and this was a couple of years after we started hanging out, invited to one of your Risk board game nights at your buddy's house, and I immediately lost. I was the first one out, and then I just got to sit there for an hour and a half. I mean, it was still fun because I enjoy hanging out with you guys, but it was just I haven't played Risk in a couple of years, and I was not very good at it when I first started playing, but I will say that I really enjoyed those board game nights, and we're planning a trip up to Cleveland in a few months for my wife and I to visit you guys, but also for kind of our anniversary trip in April. And so I'm hoping that we can play a lot of board games while we're up there as well, because I always really enjoyed those board game nights. And honestly, you're what got me. I mean, I was always into board games, but especially within the last year or so, I've been buying a lot more board games, and my wife and I have been playing a lot more board games because of that. You definitely have gotten me into it, and I've really gotten into a different type of board game that you really definitely got me into, which is kind of like One Night, Ultimate Werewolf, those types of games where you all have roles and you try to figure out what each other's roles are, and you kind of bribe each other or lie to each other. And I've really started to get into those types of games. Like Sheriff of Nottingham is really fun, and like the werewolf game that I mentioned before. And there's a couple others that I really enjoy playing. So I've been really getting into those more adult type of board games like you were talking about, and I really enjoy those. But my answer, the board game that I've probably played the most is Trivial Pursuit Pop Culture Edition. My buddy Mike, when we were in college, we used to play this all the time. And we would play it with each other, but we would also play it with groups. And it basically became whoever we were playing it with, we would just become a team. And we had to be on separate teams because we knew more about pop culture than any of our other friends knew about it. So we had to be on separate teams, because that was the only way that the other people even had a chance to win. So I really enjoy playing that game, and I enjoy trivia games in general. I really enjoyed going to Reraw with you and your wife, playing the trivia they had every Tuesday night, and we haven't done that in a while, obviously because you moved, but also your schedule had changed before you moved, where you had to work on Tuesday nights, so we weren't able to go to that. But I just enjoy trivia in general, and I really enjoyed playing Trivial Pursuit Pop Culture.
Yeah, man, that's a good pick, and I do miss those trivia nights quite a bit. That was always fun, so it's a bummer that those got cut short even before I moved. But yeah, good pull, man.
All right, cool. So that's it for episode 176 of the Nerd You're Looking For podcast. As always, we'd appreciate if you subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use, we're on it. Check out our website at nerdspodcast.com, which is basically just kind of a hub for everything that we do, whether it's the YouTube channel, we do occasionally post to the blog, but also the episode index, Rotten Tomatoes film draft, all that good stuff. It can be found on our website, thenerdspodcast.com. Comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Nerds You're Looking For. Check out our Twitch channel. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. They're both at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. Email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. And of course, vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt.
we are The Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.